Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Welcome to Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan, and again, thank you for joining us for a free podcast. This podcast is available free on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, and our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. We're excited to have children's author John Strickland. As a student at Yale University, John joined the Yale Daily News, ending up as senior editor. He graduated with honors major in sociology and returned home to Tucson, Arizona. The U.S. Peace Corps had accepted his application and assigned him to the Philippines, but his draft board felt that as a conscientious objector, he was unfit for Peace Corps service. The battle over his destiny led to a U.S. Army assignment at a military advisory group in UN Command Headquarters in South Korea. Taking his discharge in Seoul, he established one of the first advertising agencies in that country, assisting Korean firms with their exports and tourism development. At the same time, he filed news reports for the CBS radio network. After a decade in Seoul, John and his wife, fine artist Soma Han, and their two boys returned to the States, settling in California. Acquiring a national business magazine, he began a career of publishing, editing, journalism, and corporate public relations, and now it has led to writing children's books as well. So John, thank you so much for joining us here on Magical Books for Kids. It's an honor to have you.
Michael, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
First of all, you have quite a background in there, and obviously you're a pretty smart guy, having attended Yale and everything. How was that experience, first of all, attending such a fine university in Yale?
Well, it was very special. My father went there and insisted that I at least make an attempt to get in. And I think I had good grades in high school, and I think geographical distribution helped. They don't get too many applicants from Arizona. So I think that got me in. And I have to confess, I was not one of the top students. I spent most of my time working at the Yale Daily News. And looking back on my life, I realized that my experience there, both in editorial and on the advertising side, has served me in good stead during my life.
That makes sense. I mean, I graduated from St. John's University, and I'll be honest with you, I don't remember many of the courses that I took during the 4 years, but I worked on the radio station and I worked for the school paper. And to me, that gave me the experience that I wanted to do and to go into newspapers. So I completely understand that. Don't feel bad that you weren't one of the top students. You actually probably learned quite a bit as a senior editor of Yale, at Yale.
Well, it is the oldest college daily, and it was a very valuable experience. In fact, I was just thinking prior to this that it must have helped me get the CBS News assignments when I was in Seoul. I did the guy who was doing the CBS radio reports, just as a freelancer, left town, and the bureau chief from Tokyo came over to look for someone. And of all the people that he interviewed, and I have no idea how many, I was the one that was able to write the news spot best, and I got hired.
Yeah, that's quite a bit of experience. I kind of admire that. You've lived in a different culture, a different country, and now you're back in the States, as you mentioned, but still it's pretty remarkable that you've had that particular experience. Many people in this world don't even have a chance to get out of the country. So congratulations on doing something like that. That's pretty admirable.
Yes, it may be in my blood. My parents were both wanderers and both physicians, and had met at graduate school in London, and they got married and went home the other way around before the air flights were available. So I guess I inherited that.
So you've had an incredible experience as a journalist for sure, working for such a network like CBS and filing from a foreign country. You've also written books on travel and international trade. So how did that happen from the transition to children's books? That's a pretty remarkable and steep transition, I must say.
Well, it is, and it was unexpected. But when my wife and I arrived back in the States, she was an immigrant and adapted very quickly. She was struck by meeting Korean adoptees and also first generation Korean kids who had, as she put it, lost their roots. They had no ground to stand on in terms of their Korean culture. And in those days, back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the recent immigrants were trying to leave their heritage behind. They wanted to become Americans. But she was concerned for these kids, and there are lots of them. As you may know, since the Korean War, a lot of Korean kids have been adopted over here. So she was motivated to help them learn a little bit of Korean culture. And she thought, well, maybe if we work together on this, we could help them. And so she told me what to write. She's a co-author, and then she's also a fine artist, and she did all the illustrations. And we found a publisher. I may talk about that later. And the book came out from Tuttle Publishing in Vermont. And we sent the manuscript around, and we couldn't find very much interest. But eventually it came out, and that triggered a second book from the same publisher. The first one was a book of proverbs that we did not write. Take that back. A Peace Corps volunteer in Seoul who'd been there for 8 years collected some Korean proverbs. And the publisher of that was looking for a Korean illustrator. So her first book, she illustrated a book of Proverbs. It's called Tigers, Frogs, and Rice Cakes from Shen's Publishing. And she was taken to it immediately because her mother used to use Proverbs to educate her kids rather than, no, don't do this. She would quote from the scriptures and the folk tales. And that book did very well. And so that led us to do our own Korean culture book, nonfiction book. And this is the one that's instructive for these adoptees and the first generation kids. And it's got 16 or 17 small chapters on Korean culture items, music, food, games. You know, how did Koreans do ironing before electricity came into the country? Stuff like that. And it's very well done. It's still selling. And after the success of that one, we decided to go back to this original manuscript, Maya and the Turtle, the book we're talking about today. And we pitched it to Tuttle, and they bid immediately. A lot of other publishers had refused it before that. And it came out 2012 and has done pretty well. It was very popular in Korea. It's in the libraries in Australia, and we're very proud of it. And we decided to put it into an audio book, and we can talk about that.
Well, let's talk about the idea behind Maya and the Turtle. How did that come about? Whose idea was it originally? Did you co-author the idea itself? Is that how it worked? You bounce things back and forth between each other? Is that how your situation goes? Everybody is different in the way they handle the idea.
Yes, no, this is an authentic tale, and it has a great history. She learned it at her mother's knee when she was little. Her mother was a storyteller and could make her telling fascinating to her kids. All in all, she had 9 over the last century, and her mother had learned it from her mother. back when the king was still on the throne in Korea. So the story came to us intact, and she told it to me as she had heard it from her mother, and we did embellish it a little bit and make a few tweaks, but it's essentially the same one that's been coming down. We don't know where her grandmother got it, but no, that's why I'm able to call it an authentic Korean fairy tale.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the story itself, without giving away too much, obviously, because we want people to buy the book. And obviously,
Yes.
this book is available online at all different places. You can buy the book itself.
Yes.
I assume that, as you mentioned, it's done very well in South Korea itself. And you mentioned the libraries. I would hope that libraries across the states would pick up a book like this, because it deals with the culture of South Korea. And I always think that it's good for libraries to have a good, vast diversity of different cultures and different books. So hopefully that's the case. I don't know, has that been the case for you as far as noticing?
Well, we're totally in agreement with you. And I think it does belong in the libraries. One example I just read in the Tucson, Arizona paper not long ago, that one of the Tucson public libraries had hired a Vietnamese librarian, American, and she had convinced them to set up an Asian corner in that library.
Very nice.
So that caught my eye. Tucson is not known for a high Asian population, but you add them all up, they're all over the place. And so I immediately contacted her and offered a copy of the audiobook, and she was immediately responsive and talked to her people over there. And to my delight and surprise, they ordered 6 copies for their new Asian section and ordered a copy of the audiobook for their kids to listen to. So I'm trying to replicate that around other libraries. The hardback helps because it makes a nice precedent. If you go online, I found out that in Australia, 6 libraries have copies of it in their children's sections. So it's well suited for kids and for any Asian connection. Yeah.
Is that what you're finding, that if you have a hard copy as opposed to a soft copy, that libraries are more probably prevalent to pick it up because of the wear and tear, I guess, on a particular book?
I'm sure that's a major consideration when they buy books. I wouldn't feel right giving a paperback or to a library, because they get worn out very quickly. In this case, all 3 books were published initially in hardcover. The only one that's gone to soft cover is the second one. When Shen's books sold, it was purchased by Lee and Low in New York, which is known for all their diverse children's topics. And when they got the rights to it, they brought out a paperback copy of it, The Land of Morning Calm. So you're right about that, yes.
Is there a particular, I know you mentioned it's for all people, is there a particular age group that you were trying to reach? This is the problem I always find with publishers, is when you send out a book to them, they want everything categorized. They want to know what age group it is, what it's for, what the genre is, blah, blah, blah. All that. Well, they want everything in a very neat little tight box.
No, you're right. Everything's categorized. And I'm fortunate because the schools in Korea, we're going to get to that question, I hope, they categorized it for me. When they chose
that's
it,
good. I like that. Yeah.
Well, and they break the K through 12 school into 4 categories for books for library purposes. And there's lower elementary for the little kids, upper elementary for the older, and then middle, and then high school. And they put Maya in the upper elementary, which they call 4th through 6th grade.
Okay.
So I've stuck with that. ever since. And it's, it satisfies the librarians and
Right.
the buyers.
Right, because the story is probably for older kids in that particular category. If you read the book itself, and it's about just a few lines about Maya. She's a kind, gentle girl living in poverty, and when her father falls ill, Maya offers herself as a sacrifice to a monster centipede terrorizing the village in exchange for money to cure her father. So that is a very deep story, obviously,
Yes.
for kids.
Well, like many, probably most Oriental tales, folk tales, they all contain a lesson. And this one is about filial piety. It's a subtle message of respect for your parents. And I was at a book sale yesterday, and my first line to everybody coming to the table is exactly that it teaches children about respect for their parents. And the response of most of the parents I'm talking to are saying, yes, I need one of those. And so it's that's the sales pitch. The kids didn't realize it, of course, but the fact that little Maya is willing to sacrifice her life to save her father when he's ill is the message. And how deep is that respect?
Oh, this is definitely hits home, because I have two daughters myself. And, to me, the relationship between a father and daughter is absolutely special and unique and everything. And I would assume, and as I said, I've never been to South Korea. In fact, my oldest has been to South Korea. She has friends in South Korea.
Oh,
she has friends in China. She has friends in Japan.
Goodness.
Yes, she speaks Japanese. So she's also studied it in Japan twice as well. So I've met many of her friends when she did an internship at Disney. And of course, before the whole COVID thing happened,
Yes.
you had kids from all over the world coming, and she used to bring them to the apartment here in Florida, and I meet them all as such beautiful kids and everything. And it was just nice to meet, people from another culture, another part of the world and everything. So it's great to see such a book that you and your wife have put out. You mentioned your wife and everything. Let's just talk about her and her illustrations and her background. Can you just talk about her a little bit and how you met and how this whole this combining to put together such a beautiful book happened?
Yes, well, we met in Seoul, and she was home on vacation from California College of the Arts, where she'd been accepted as a fine arts student. And I had spent some time in Seoul, and it's amazing how many of the Korean women are beautiful. I claim that they have the highest percentage among the three primary Asian countries, if you want to look for female beauty. And then her art talent is just incredible. She went after she graduated. Before she graduated, we had emigrated back to California, and she was very quickly selling in major galleries. And when it came to, after I sent around the manuscript for Maya and the Turtle and the illustrations, she had done illustrations for it. She wanted to, the publisher that we sent it to at that point was very interested because of her artwork, and got hired. We're back to the first book now, the proverb book written by the Korean.
Tigers, Frogs, and Rice Cakes.
Rice Cakes, yeah, sorry. And they made her an offer after seeing her illustrations for Maya and the Turtle, which had not sold yet. And they asked if she could do 28 illustrations in 2 months for the book. And she came to me and she said, it takes me 1 to 2 months to do a watercolor. and she does very large
Right.
format watercolors. How
Mm.
can I do 28 in 2 months? And I said, well, this is a door opening for you. Maybe you should try it. And the Proverbs, she had to come up with an illustration for each one, but she bit the bullet, sat down, conceived an illustration, the idea of each proverb. They have one which is similar to ours. Think of the tiger and he appears. And she managed to do all 28 within the time frame. And the publisher was delighted, and her new career was started as an illustrator of children's books. And then it was after that we did the nonfiction, and then finally came back around to Maya and found a publisher for that one.
Right. And the nonfiction title was Skipping Stones, right? Is that the one?
No, that's
Oh, that was chosen by Skipping
magazine that
Stones.
gave them the award. Yeah.
Right, for the 2005 Multicultural International Honor Award. And there was a book that you haven't mentioned, but Land of Morning Calm,
That's it.
Korean Culture Then and Now. That's the
the one.
book.
That's
That is the
one.
book.
Yeah.
Right. And that was honored by Skipping Stones magazine. And
Yes.
the third book, the Korean fairy tale, which we've been talking about, is Maya and the Turtle.
Yes.
And that won the Morning Calm Award, voted by students in 15 international schools across South Korea. That's a pretty nice honor to have, that it was voted by the students itself.
Well, that's best. Those are the best critics that you want. It's fine for grown-ups, but you can't do any better than it was. It was very impressive. The irony about that was that we won the competition before we knew that it was even in the competition, that it was competing. And in Seoul, in South Korea, there are 15 international schools. Those are the schools with teaching in English, instruction in English. And the prize is cooked up by the librarians of those 15 schools. And they based it on one which has been well established in Japan, called the Sakura Medal. And they've been doing this for quite a while among 20 schools. And so what they decided to do a few years ago was to select 4 books in each of those 4 age groups at the beginning of the school year. And they put together a PowerPoint presentation for the whole school body and introduced the 4 books in each category. And they buy a supply of them for their libraries so that the kids have access to them all year. They have 8 months to read all 4. And then in April, they vote. And the top one in each category receives this newly prestigious Land of Morning Calm Award. And we were notified after the competition was over. The award certificates and the book stickers were sent probably by sea mail from Korea to Vermont, where our publisher was. And they notified us back by airmail, and you're a winner. And so we took the prize and ran with it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's nice that you received that honor. It's always nice to get some honor itself, because
yes, you got to have a sticker for the cover.
That's exactly. That's why you need the sticker. We recently got one. We got the Mom's Choice Award for a lizard who loves a blizzard. So it's nice to get that. It's just nice. You know, it's just nice because you put so much work into it, so much time. There's a lot of effort. There's a lot of marketing and promotion that you have to do.
Yes.
Because we're all doing it and everything. And your wife is also a charter member of the Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., and has been profiled in Who's Who in America. So both of you have certainly an impressive and extensive background. So let's talk about now the audiobook. The audiobook, I happened to recently speak to a publisher. He's publishing my next novel. And I was asking him, well, what is selling today? And he says, well, what is selling is hardcover / softcover. Kindles, for some reason, the ebooks have fallen below that. And audiobooks are on the rise. People I guess because of the pandemic, that's where podcasting became very big. And now audiobooks seem to be the trend where now every publisher wants to do an audiobook and everything. And it seemed like you guys were ahead of the trend at this point. So why don't you talk about the audiobook itself, and perhaps at the end of this podcast, if we get a file, we can attach it to this particular podcast with our producer. So we'll make sure that our producer understands that this is what we want to do towards after this is over. We want to attach it as sort of a bonus for the people who are listening to this. So why don't you talk about the audiobook itself, how that came about, and I guess you added special and sound effects. You did something more than most people do.
Well, they range from, one guy reading his book to some very elaborate audio books. But I if you can't see the pictures, you do need a little sound effect to, it certainly enhances the text. To back up a second, a year or two ago, I heard I joined a webcast, webinar about audiobooks. And they told me what you just said, how they're catching on and how they're growing and how to do it. And I listened to that and I thought I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I couldn't do it without the rights. I a little bit frustrated by the royalties that these brick and mortar publishers tend to pay or not pay. And,
okay. We could talk a little bit about that too. Because we publish our own children's books. That's the thing. We make sure that we get everything. We own all the rights.
There you go. You see, because with the traditional publishers, not much left for the poor author. And
no, not at all. Not for children's books. No.
Even the author and the illustrator together still doesn't add up to very much. So I thought, as you did, I'd like to have control of this. So I negotiated with the holders of the copyright, who are based in Singapore.
Oh, Lord. Okay, good luck.
Yeah, well, that's not, doesn't make it easy, I tell you. Oh. And so they were hard bargainers, but we got a pretty good deal, no money down, and a share of the profits, which we haggled over for a while. But once I had that in writing, then my first choice for a narrator, it's only, if read aloud, it's only about 10 minutes. So,
yes.
Not like a novel where you have someone has to really work on it. And so we had in mind for a narrator, this very young woman that we knew when we lived in Los Angeles, delightful little girl whose father's British, her mother's Chinese American, and precocious with a capital P. When she was 6, she was on the stage. By the time she was 8 years old, she qualified for SAG-AFTRA. She's now a union member and gets the highest wages. She appeared on television with Julia Louis-Dreyfus on the Veep program. She had a recurring role, and her career is off and running now. But she did a marvelous job. And I have a quote from.
Yeah, that's a pretty big program to be on Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Well, especially if it's your first, especially if it's your first television show.
Yeah, and for her to do your book, that's pretty nice.
Yeah, no, it was
way
a
to
delight.
go.
If you listen to it, it's and she is so professional. I sent a review copy to the American Library Association, and they reviewed it in their book list newsletter, which goes out to librarians nationwide. And just a quick clip from that, they said, child actor Shadrick gives a charming performance, dramatically flawless. And it is. It's kind of eye-opening or ear-opening to hear a little girl read so professionally. And to me, it was just a perfect match for Maya. And anyway, so we put it together. My son does the intro and the extra, and then at the end, Soma is on there dedicating the book to her mother, thanks to the
Beautiful.
lineage
Very
of
nice.
the story. Yeah, and it adds a nice kind of poignant touch to the audiobook. And maybe you could include that, and then you hear her voice.
We're
as
going to
well
try to do that, yes,
as
because that's
mine.
yes, obviously this is a well done audiobook with someone who's, you know, quite established
Yes.
in the entertainment business. So that's congratulations on that. Not
Yeah.
only do you have a beautiful book with wonderful illustrations and a great story, you have somebody that has given the words. I always say this, that the people that do the narration are sort of like painters too, as well. They're painting with their voices and their tones and the way they express themselves and everything. And people say, well, if it doesn't have the pictures to it, well, you can put the pictures to it if you wish. If you have the book, or in a lot of cases, a lot of the audiobooks, as they're reading, the pictures are popping up for you visually. So there's all sorts of ways that people can see it, not only listen to it. And I think that would be a great way for kids, is to listen, read the book as the audio is being read and everything. And that's a great way to learn how to read as well, and to understand the enunciations and pronunciations of everything. So
you're right. Some people have suggested that they do that with their children.
That's the best way to do it. Audiobook, and you have the book in front of them, and they read and they listen to it, and they hear the pronunciation, and that is, to me, the best way to learn, especially for young children, to learn to read, and they'll pick it up, you know, with repetition. For repetition.
Very quickly.
Yeah. I was a person that needed a lot of repetition. I had to read, and you know, until it finally hit into my head, you know, and that gave sense. So okay, so Maya and the Turtle, it's available on all platforms to buy and everything. So is there a follow-up book? Is there a book that you plan on doing, or is there a book that you want to do and you haven't done it yet, or is the book that you already have planned right now? So let's say five questions, but really it's one question at this point.
No, we're both retired now, and no plans for future books. Soma's retired from painting, and if I do any writing, it's journalism, because that's my background, and I write stories about what's happening.
Are you traveling, or are you enjoying life? Is that, what are you doing? Obviously, you can't travel too much because of this whole virus thing.
I have to tell you that for the last 2 years, we've been holed up here. We got our shots. We're heading for our boosters sometime this month.
Yeah, I got my booster last week. Yeah.
So that's it. I'm putting all my marketing effort into telling about the audiobook, and we are both very appreciative of your invitation today to come on and talk about it. Can I give a plug to the YouTube video?
You can do anything you want. This is your 30 minutes here.
Okay.
Yes.
There's a 90-second trailer up on YouTube, and all you have to do is just type in Maya and the Turtle, and that has. I thought it was pretty nicely done, and it's got a nice soundtrack all the way through with Korea's most popular folk song, and it tells all about the book, and I think your listeners would appreciate it, and perhaps
it's great. And the great thing about this podcast, the great thing about our website, the great thing about YouTube, because we do put the interviews up on YouTube as well eventually, is that anybody from anywhere can listen to this. It doesn't matter where you are, well, unless you're in a oppressive country, you know, so to speak. I don't even know if YouTube's in China. I don't believe they are. I mean, I think all those particular type of platforms are not in China. So, but they certainly are in South Korea.
Yes.
I doubt they're in North Korea, though.
I doubt that also.
No. I mean, it's very interesting too. So, all right. So you're basically promoting the audiobook and everything, which I think is great because of the particular person also narrating it. So she's narrating a wonderful story and everything. So, we are certainly happy to have you on. And if there's a time that your wife would like to come on and talk about her career as well, we will certainly love to have her on in the future. So we're excited to have this particular part. And I know my daughter will be excited to listen to this because of all her friends in South Korea and Japan, as well as China and everything. So she's into anime, and she reads all those books that are backwards. I think those are I call them the backwards books that that you see that the Japanese books and everything like
Start
that.
on the last page.
Yes, exactly. And then there's the big Pokemon stuff, the Pokemon cards and everything like that. So I went through it all and everything like that. So it's wonderful to have you on and to have such a book like this on. So I thank you, John Strickland, for joining me. And please, people, pick up Maya and the Turtle. And I don't think it matters whether you're Asian or not, or whether you've been to South Korea or not. I think it's just a great book to learn about culture and to hear from other people from what what their culture was like or is like. So to me, it's always wonderful. And that's how we learn to understand each other, is to read about each other and educate ourselves. So thank you so much for joining us here on Magical Books for Kids.
Thank you, Michael. My pleasure.
Right, and so this is Michael John Sullivan. Again, this podcast and all of our podcasts are free on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, and our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. Join us again for another free edition of Magical Books for Kids.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.
That, but it's so, to me, I feel like that sense of responsibility that I really want it to be, and I want it to spark a love of history and an interest in history. And when I was a kid, if my science class was all about a leaf, I would get like 100 on every single test because I could hyper focus on the leaf and learn everything about the leaf. But if the subject was really broad, I had a lot of trouble like memorizing all of that and learning it from this big global perspective. So I guess I'm more of like a micro person.
Right, you give more attention to the little details as opposed to the little details.
So I'm thinking, like, if this gives kids like this nautical piece of history that they may not have otherwise been interested in or known about or learned about, and it sparks a little bit about learning about the age of sail and you know, how did we chart those currents? How did these boats navigate? No radar. No,
exactly. There's no GPS on your cell phone then.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So and again, like I created a teacher guide for both books.
Oh, that's great. Great.
Which just gives across like several different subject matter, some ideas for essays or research projects or engineering projects or climate change stuff or, you know, whatever. And one of the things I came up with was who helped us map the currents of our oceans. And certainly in the Atlantic Ocean, it would be Benjamin Franklin, right? So if not for his love of science and figuring things out, right? He also gave us the library.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things he gave, including spectacles, eyeglasses. Yeah, there was a lot of things he did.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of the library. My local library helped me tremendously getting my research books. So I'm
the librarians and the libraries are treasures. I consider them treasures. So we want to make sure they stay around for sure. So we are talking to Marguerite Maitland. She's written a series of books Runaway at Sea and Adventure at Sea, and there's another book coming out next year. How do people find this? They can find it on Amazon. There's a particular website.
I'm trying to also direct people to the Barnes and Noble too, because I'm trying to get the attention of Barnes and Noble. So
well, exactly, you want to help all the bookstores.
Yeah, I am trying to get it picked up to actually be carried in the book, so in the stores, but it is online at Barnes and Noble. It's also on Amazon. I'm hoping now that things are opened up to do more book signings, at least like locally on Long Island.
Right.
And you can go to the Runaway at Sea, all like smushed together, runawayatsea.com. And, you know, both links to the books, the synopsis of the books, my creative writing workshop is on there. Any author events are on there. You know, some videos from previous appearances are on there. So there's a lot of information on that website. So you can get a lot of stuff. And if you're a teacher or a librarian and you're interested in doing a program or a book signing or whatever, there's a form in the purchase tab to fill out. And that note comes to me, it comes to my publisher. So if you're interested in doing that, I just did a couple of weeks ago 3 Zoom sessions for 3 7th grade classes in Arizona.
Wonderful. See how we can reach people everywhere now.
It's nice. Really amazing, right? Yeah. So and these kids loved my book. Mm-hmm. They had so many thoughtful questions. The teacher built a whole curriculum around my book. Mm-hmm. And the kids created their own books and talked about point of view and story arc. And, you know, it was a creative writing project for them. So it was a really incredible experience for me to have these 7th graders, you know, boys and girls, like, right. There was not like one or the other, it was both of them very engaged in the story, asking all kinds of questions, very thoughtful, very insightful. It was really an a very rewarding experience for me. So I could certainly do that anywhere, right? Like,
sure, so, exactly. That's what Zoom is for, right? And all these different digital technical things we have. So well, we have to have you back when your next book comes out next spring. So
I would love that. That would be fantastic. So this was great. I really appreciate you know, you inviting me on the show. This has been a great chit chat about writing and
more to come. More to come. So we continue to do this every week. So I want to thank you for joining us here for Magical Books for Kids. And I do want to let people know, the listeners, and we are gathering an audience. I think this is going to be the first month we actually had over 1,000 downloads.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we're very happy. We're very happy about that. So you can hear it on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, as well as our website, magiceverywhereinc.com. And thank you again for joining us. And please join us again for another free edition of Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.